Really delighted to be on this esteemed panel. It's inspiring to me as well, certainly to hear about how my colleagues think through the core principles. And so, one of the things I want to start by telling you is simply that I came to St. Mary's and took this job 100% because of the Lasallian mission. The core principles, when I came onto campus, when I interviewed for this job, just like everywhere else, you have a rigorous interview and you meet with administrators, other faculty, and students, and you do a teaching demo, and all these kinds of things. I'd been on other interviews, but I heard all this language about the core principles, and they speak to me so deeply as a sociologist and as the kind of educator that I am, that I indeed took this job 10 years ago and have specific ways in my sociology work and my classroom that I think that they come through. And so I'd like to link with some of my colleagues' comments here and talk about how in the micro environment, how, as Professor Santiago is talking about, how we do the work and roll up our sleeves and try to enact these aspirational principles. I'll just talk about in my little world how we do that. So in thinking of respect for all persons, inclusive community, social justice, concern for the poor and social justice, quality education, and faith in the presence of God. When you, in my classes, some of my core classes are gender sociology, sociology of race and ethnicity, and social movements, or how people mobilize in order to create social change. So I'll kind of focus on those three and the way that, for me, enacting the kind of dialogue in the classroom amongst students is a way that we attempt to embody those principles. So, for example, in sociology, I'm sure it's used in other disciplines as well, there's a concept called social location. And it's about where you fit into the social structure based on your unique combination of, in categories of race, ethnicity, sexualities, gender, nation of origin, language, political orientation, age, these kinds of things. So I think a lot about each of us from different social locations in every classroom coming together to talk about issues like race and ethnicity. That's not particularly easy. And so it's my job to create all the conditions, I believe, as an educator, it's my job to create all the conditions in which people can come to dialogue, cross-racial dialogue in this particular example, with every day and every minute an embodiment of respect for all persons, inclusive community, concern for the poor and social justice, quality education, and faith in the presence of God. And the way I think of that is there's a spark of dignity, respect and dignity deserved in each person. And whether that person in front of me is a believer from any different faith or a non-believer, it's the inherent dignity of each person. So when we come together in a class like my sociology of race and ethnicity class, every single class, it's very dialogue based, and my students come together in order to talk about what's difficult, to talk about whiteness, to talk about systemic racism, to talk about not only theories of white supremacy, but how those play themselves out globally, nationally, and yes, on our very own campus. These are not easy conversations to have, and I not only admire and respect my students for doing the reading, they do. They prepare every single time as far as I can tell. I mean, maybe somebody slips in there, you know what I'm saying? But people prepare, they come in ready to talk. They come in ready to use to take frameworks and put them into real life and apply them to real life and talk with others of different social locations about what it is that this means to be someone from a different social location who perhaps receives microaggressions and in some cases macroaggressions certainly on a daily basis. What my students learn in community is how to sit with those realities, how to understand what it means to be in somebody else's shoes. And so I say this just as I believe that, like all my colleagues here, I believe it's our work to try to embody the principles. I believe in it so much. I took this job 2,400 miles away from my family in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm from a working class family that stays typically very, very local. I moved that far away by myself into this community because of my deep, deep belief in these principles. And I watch my students, with inspiration, I watch my students on a daily basis embodying them, embodying care and empathy and compassion, hearing someone else, hearing their experience, being able to say, you know, I really loved what you said, and part of it, you know, I see it differently, and being able to build on each other's comments and weave and collaborate. And so for me in my world, I get to watch my students do the work of it. I know that same work is done, as Myrna was saying, in the residence halls, in the dining hall, in the Mission and Ministry Center, in SILSA, all these different spaces. And I want to really highlight, I know maybe later we'll have a question about challenges because Karen asked me to think about that as well, but what I want to highlight for now is the inspiration that I receive truly every single day from my own students enacting these principles. And so I know, and of course that's just my little world, that's my one little piece of St. Mary's College, and I know it happens in other spaces across campus. And so I find that very hopeful, and I also find it very painful when those principles have been violated. It's extremely hard, not only individually, but as a community, when we hear of something like Professor Raina Leon's experience that she wrote about in the Chronicle of Higher Education, that happening on our campus. We have to struggle as an individual, but as a member of a community that has these aspirations, we have to struggle with these kinds of things, and with the fact that any number of the members in our community say, I'm not getting to experience this on a regular basis. And so I think that gives us a lot of work to do, a lot of challenges, and a lot of, we have our work cut out for us, but the work is so important that that's what animates me as a professor.